All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Wow, this is, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Let me just say, you all came on a very good day. You really did. Of all the days this week, this is going to be an extraordinary day. Everything going on at the CDC. We'll run it down with the great and distinguished doctor in an ER. He's a working doctor, hip deep in blood and urgency. Yes, Dr. Michael Daignault joins us in the first half hour. Then, the extraordinary, maybe one of my favorite writers on all things politics and America, the insanely brilliant and, might I say, gifted when it comes to telling the truth about Donald Trump. Apart from David K. Johnston, I would say she is right there as my favorite. Sarah Kendzior joins. I know. And that's why I'm here too. And then the great legal mind, one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world, the former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, David Katz joins in the second hour. Wow, right? Pretty insanely terrific. So thank you for being here. I sound like I have a cold. It's because I am close to death. I only got out of my bed because Dr. Daignault, Sarah Kendzior, and David Katz were going to be here. Mm-hmm. I am truly so ill. But I've done this show with COVID twice. I've done this show pretty sick. I mean, I remember one time I did the show, I was so sick that at the end of Friday Fabulous Florida, I barely made it to the end. It was a Friday, obviously. And I started to feel lightheaded. And I said to Kim, right here on the air, I said, Kim, I'm afraid I have to turn the show over to you. I told her ahead of time that I wasn't feeling great. And then literally, right after I tossed the show to her, I passed out right here. I mean, I fell. I could have easily, hit my head and it would have been the end. Hang on, I've got to just wipe my nose.
Yeah, I remember that. You fainted, and luckily you had turned the camera off already,
right?
So we didn't have to see all that dramatic falling.
If we have an incident like that again today, I'll try to keep the camera on so that you can all see it. Right, exactly.
Well, we have the doctor to talk us through it this next time.
We do. We have the doctor in the house, as is often said. Thank you so much for getting in touch with the show. Many of you have. I got a cool email from Singapore overnight.
What?
I know. Listener in Singapore. It's a pretty cool thing when there are people listening from across the world. You always forget that there might be...
I've received a lot of positive letters.
I'll find it later, but it's she's a regular listener live in Singapore. What time is it in Singapore, Albert? I ask you.
Google it.
You're the Googler here. Albert is our producer.
Albert, thank you.
If he's not out walking the dog or doing something, he's usually available to do things like Google what time it is in Singapore, which he will tell us right now.
It's 2 a.m.
Yeah.
2 a.m. in Singapore. Shout out to our late nighters in Singapore. Thank you for listening. And apparently she was saying that she's recommended the show and now they listen regularly in Denmark, which is, so I love the reach of the show. It's really good. Both of those places are on the list of possible areas we are considering relocating to as America falls apart.
Kim, how are you?
Kim, you are playing above your normal grade. Yeah, you really are quite.
Maybe you're giving me the day off or something nice. It sounded like no.
Well, I know you live for the show. You wouldn't want a day off anyway.
No,
so
wouldn't.
Quickly before I get to Dr. Daignault and what's happening at the CDC and the madness of RFK Jr. What's happening in the nation's capital is interesting. They've tried, and you'll hear more about this when we talk to David Katz in hour 2, to indict that dude who threw the sandwich at the...
Sandwich guy.
Yeah, sandwich guy. There's the old phrase, you can indict a ham sandwich in this country. Well, apparently not,
No.
because a grand jury, and I'll remind you, when there's a grand jury impaneled, the grand jury hears the prosecutor's charges and reviews prosecutorial evidence without the defense having a chance to offer any rebuttal. So you're only hearing the prosecutor. That's just the way the system is set up. So it's for that reason that it said, well, a grand jury, they would indict a ham sandwich. They're only hearing the prosecutorial part.
Yeah.
Well, they only heard the prosecutorial part. They couldn't get a grand jury to indict this guy. So that is that's an issue we'll talk about with David Katz, as I say, in hour 2, the former federal prosecutor. Also, the fight over what's going on at the Fed is now going to court, as Donald Trump has fired, it seems illegally fired, somebody on the, her cook's her last name, I forget her first name.
Lisa.
Lisa, thank you. With this cold, I can't remember anything. But it's something of a showdown. But as I said when it first happened, it's a message to Jerome Powell. The whole thing's a message to Jerome, which is, I want these interest rates lowered, and if you won't do it, I'm going to start putting people there who will on the Fed board. And the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this Lisa Cook, and I will get rid of anybody else I've got to get rid of. This is my country. I run it, and we'll play by my rules. And that's the message being sent. So in any case, she's going to go to court, and we'll talk about that. Gavin Newsom, in a long back and forth, talking about the death of democracy and how he feels we've kind of moved to a stage where there's a certain urgency or alarm that we should all have. Excuse me.
Yeah,
and,
he sat down with Politico and gave a long interview. He even said, he joked around, he's launching his own meme coin, which he has this website where we talked about it yesterday, where he has this merch that he's allegedly selling, but it's all satire. It's all a joke. He said, I'll put my new meme, my new anti-Trump meme on my satire website for sale. So kind of funny, but he does go into, talking about the fall of democracy and how bad this is for all of us. Yeah, we'll play some of that a little bit later. Jose Andres, who's the celebrity chef who's done so much, particularly in areas hard hit by disaster. As you know, he sets up these kitchens overnight, and he feeds so many who desperately need to be fed. I mean, he's just an extraordinary guy. I played cards with him a few years ago in Washington, D.C., actually. Oh. And he's so transcendently nice that I remember the last hand of the night, I had, and poker players will appreciate, I had a set of 10s, the best for that particular configuration of cards, the very best. I just remember because it was Jose Andres. And I'd flopped this, and there was an ace there too, and I think he had an ace. Maybe he thought he had, but blah, blah, blah. He's so nice that I just told him, because he wanted to, he really wanted to put all the money in, and I flipped my cards over, and I said, don't do that. Don't do that. And then he realized, that he had a loser and I had the winner. But I mentioned this because Jose Andres is a remarkable guy. I mean, and you just spend any time around him and you go, wow. So his latest back and forth involves the president of the United States. He's in Washington, D.C. with a D.C. restaurant. And what is the latest on this, Kim? It's that Trump, I think, is saying that the reason he's moving the National Guard in, the reason that there are troops there on the streets of Washington is because no one was going to dinner, or what was the Trump quote is, friends of mine are going out to dinner now, but they haven't gone out to dinner in 4 years because they were afraid, they were petrified. He said, Trump, half of the restaurants are closed because no one could go because they're afraid to go outside. But now, he said, those restaurants are open and new restaurants are opening up. And celebrity chef Jose Andres says, that's a flat out lie. No. He said, I understand why you're confused to the president. All your time in D.C., you haven't eaten once outside the White House or your own hotel. But he said, I've lived here for 33 years, and it's a flat out lie that half of the restaurants have closed because of safety, but restaurants will close because you have troops with guns and federal agents harassing people, making people afraid to go out. So basically slamming him down.
Yeah. Nice job, Jose Andres.
Don't talk to me that way.
The numbers on Open Table, remember I gave them to you just a couple of weeks ago. The month-to-month numbers, reservations for restaurants in Washington, D.C., down 60%. I mean, since the troops moved in. So, nice that somebody in some place is speaking truth to power. All right. Let's get going.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This guy is an actual ER doctor. He comes through to set us straight on everything from vaccine technology to the latest developments in all sorts of medical technologies that can improve our lives. And at the same time, he watches with great interest, as we all do, what's happening in Washington with CDC policy and with policy under RFK Jr. He's Dr. Michael Daignault. Hello, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, good morning. Hi.
It's Albert, play for Dr. Daignault and all the boys and girls, play a little bit of the latest developments at the CDC. It is chaotic. There is an ouster of the CDC chief, Susan Monarez, and even as they demanded she resign, she refused to resign. Here's a little bit on it.
This morning, a stunning standoff at America's leading public health agency. The head of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. Susan Monarez, refusing to leave as the White House tries to fire her amid an overnight wave of high-profile departures at the agency. It comes less than a month after Monarez, a Trump appointee, was confirmed for the job.
I will ensure all recommendations are backed by publicly available gold standard science.
The Department of Health and Human Services announced Monarez was no longer CDC director yesterday. But Monarez's lawyers initially said she was not told she was fired and would not resign, adding she chose protecting the public over serving a political agenda. For that, she has been targeted. Overnight, a White House spokesman saying because Monarez refused to resign, the White House has terminated her from her position. Late Wednesday, 4 other high-ranking CDC leaders, including some of the agency's top infectious disease experts, did resign their posts amid clashes over vaccine policy under HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a vocal vaccine skeptic.
Doctors are being paid to vaccinate, not to evaluate. They're pressured to follow the money, not the science.
In an email obtained by NBC News, one of the officials that resigned emphasizes that the rise of misinformation about vaccines during the current Trump administration has cost lives. Kennedy yesterday announced changes to how Americans get COVID vaccines. The FDA approving a new round of shots for the fall, but for a limited group, adults 65 and older, along with high-risk patients, meaning this fall and winter, those new shots may be more difficult to obtain, including for children, and may not be covered by insurance for many Americans. One of the officials who resigned at the CDC highlighting Kennedy's stance on the COVID vaccine, writing, "The intentional eroding of trust in low-risk vaccines will bring us to a pre-vaccine era where only the strong will survive, and many, if not all, will suffer."
I think that's such a powerful coda to it all, you know, that you're turning back the clock on so much medical development and the evolution of medicine in so many ways. Give me your thoughts today on this, if you would, please, Doctor.
Yes, I was at work last night watching this sort of unfold in the background, just really shocked. I mean, we were all hoping that Dr. Monarez was going to be a sort of foil to what RFK was trying to do there, because, you know, a lot of the people that have been placed in these positions, you know, she comes from a very solid public health, global health background, infectious disease. And you and I have discussed her appointment on here before and how hopeful we were that she was going to be able to push back against a lot of what RFK was trying to do. And, you know, the timing is really interesting because, you know, as the report just mentioned, they just approved updated COVID vaccines for the fall, and that's from the FDA. And so the next step is the CDC Advisory Committee meets, and then they make specific recommendations about who is eligible, who should take them, who's at high risk, et cetera. And then the CDC director signs off on that, and those are the guidelines that we follow. And that meeting was supposed to happen next week. And so I feel from what I've been reading and from people that I've talked to, it's been a couple of things. So number one, remember we had that shooting at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta from a person who believed that they have not been feeling well because they were injured by the COVID vaccine. And RFK Jr. never came out publicly and said anything about how disinformation led this gentleman to go shoot up the CDC. And Dr. Monarez wanted to write an op-ed about that, and she was refused. And I think that the other issue is she has been pushing back against what I think is going to happen is RFK next month or October is going to come out and say that vaccines are the cause of rising cases of autism in the country. And so she was pushing against that. And just to remind everybody, that's been thoroughly debunked. We've had many studies that show that vaccines do not contribute to autism. So those two things, plus, she was probably going to push back against what the committee was going to recommend next week on COVID vaccines, because RFK has been just making it very difficult for us to potentially get those updated shots this fall. So those three things in particular, she was butting heads with RFK, and I think this is what happened.
The shooting that you talk about actually had an effect with CDC employees,
right?
Many deciding they didn't want to work at the CDC anymore. And there was a kind of something of an exodus there. And then,
and if you don't have your boss coming out and saying, this is wrong, like we have to clamp down on misinformation. He didn't even acknowledge that how vaccine misinformation contributed to this individual deciding to go to the CDC and just start shooting. I mean, can you imagine?
It wasn't acknowledged by the president either. Still hasn't been acknowledged.
Right. I mean, can you imagine working at a job where your boss doesn't acknowledge that somebody came in and started shooting at everybody? I mean, that's basically what they were feeling.
Yeah, it's a bizarre world. And now, in addition to those employees that left as a result of that shooting, as was noted in that piece, they're key members of the Vaccine Review Board who are all gone now. And so it seems as though, just as so many in this administration have been replaced by loyalists and those who quack the same way that RFK Jr. in this case quacks, you've got a CDC that looks to be rubber stamping whatever RFK Jr. wants. In fact, she mentions that in her remarks, that I don't want to be just rubber stamping whatever misinformation comes through. There's a quality of pushback, I guess, that in this case included her saying, no, I just won't do this.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, I mean, I think it's important that we comment on what happened overnight by some of the responses of the senators. Do you remember we talked about before how Bill Cassidy, the Louisiana Republican, who's actually a physician, he was the one that was going back and forth over a weekend about whether he was going to confirm RFK for HHS position. And he had a lot of doubts, and he met privately with RFK, and RFK assured him he wasn't going to push back on vaccines and science. And then he was agonizing over it on X, on Twitter yesterday, saying that these high-profile departures will require oversight by his panel, which is the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the HELP panel. And there's a committee meeting with the Committee on Finance in the Senate on September 4th that RFK is supposed to go to. So I imagine they'll be asking him at that time. And even Bernie Sanders was saying the attempt to fire her was outrageous. And then you had Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat of Washington. She was a former chairwoman of the committee, the HELP committee, who said that, she was calling for Kennedy's immediate termination. So I think we're starting to see some pushback, some concern from senators on both sides of the aisle that he is going too far with some of these efforts.
Removal will be hard, and especially when you try to remove one of these guys under Trump, digs in even harder. They really circle the wagons. That's just the basic politics of Trump. But this is all happening at a time when there is a new COVID-19 strain. It's now driving the majority of infections, for example, in the San Francisco Bay Area, and apparently disease levels remain high. And this is again at the start of the school year. This is according to Stanford research. And there is a new range of sort of wider symptoms, is what I was reading, with this latest iteration or mutation of COVID-19. And so I kind of ask you, with this CDC policy being it's going to be harder to get the vaccine unless you're over 65 or you show some underlying comorbidities type thing. Can you game out where this all ends up? It seems very dangerous.
Yeah, just to answer your two parts of your question there. So, even in the ER yesterday, I had 2 patients who tested positive for COVID. And so when we start seeing that, then that usually tells me that that's actually pretty widespread in the community, because you're only seeing a fraction of people that actually come to the ER that are sick. And, in talking with some of the patients, they have been at events with a large number of people. So somebody was at a hotel resort in San Diego over the weekend. Another patient works at a nursing home, and the patients there have gotten COVID. So, we're definitely, but here's the bottom line. I mean, compared to before, these patients are not being admitted to the hospital for COVID. They don't have pneumonia. They don't have hypoxia. If they're at a certain age, we prescribe them Paxlovid, which is a COVID antiviral that, prevents further virus replication, prevents you from getting sicker, requiring hospitalization. So it's a much more different. But the symptom that's really standing out these days is just severe sore throat. That has been the main symptom that we help to differentiate. And people will tell you, patients will tell you, this is worse than any other sore throat I have. It feels like I'm swallowing razor blades. So that's been sort of the telltale sign that that's probably COVID. And then the second part of your question, RFK has always said, and he's been obviously very anti-mandate, right? And said, I want to give people the choice to decide whether they want to get these vaccines, have a discussion with their doctor, et cetera. But he's going a step further. He's making it very difficult for people to actually get these. And if you look at some of the things that he tweeted this week about access to COVID vaccines, he's going to require certain populations meet with their doctor first. So you're not going to be able to just go to CVS, go to Walgreens and get the vaccine. So he's putting up additional barriers that are going to make it difficult because, for example, if you have an HMO and you're trying to make an appointment with your doctor just to get vaccinated, that's going to be very difficult. So he's putting up barriers just to make it more difficult. And at a time where I would tell people, if you are over 65, if you have certain high-risk medical conditions, now is the time to get vaccinated for COVID, because we saw this late summer surge, right, which is what we're seeing now. And so hopefully it'll mean that we won't have a winter surge. But since it's peaking now, this is the time where you need to get your updated COVID vaccine. And I would do it before options are really limited about where you can go.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little like the hoarding before the tariffs kick in. I mean,
Right.
it's crazy, and we have to do so much now because policy is such lunacy. But Doctor, thank you. I appreciate you on short notice. There's just so much going on at the CDC. We put up the bat beam, and really great to see you. Thank you, Dr. Michael Daignault.
All right, hope you feel better, Mark.
Thank you, my friend. All right, so on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at? Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everybody. Thank you for being here. I got to do the YouTube thing. Hit the like button. I know it's kind of weird. Costs you nothing, and it does help us in the YouTube universe. Essentially, what happens if you got enough likes, YouTube decides, okay, maybe we'll serve this show to some others who don't know it exists. And in that way, we end up, building an audience, building our footprint. So I appreciate that. I yield to no one in my regard for Sarah Kendzior. Her books are unbelievably revealing. They're incredibly well written. They're moving because she mixes the politics, the journalism, and the emotion, and she does it so beautifully. Her books are The View from Flyover Country, Hiding in Plain Sight. We're going to have links to all these books under this video. And the Hiding in Plain Sight book is also titled The Invention of Donald Trump and the Erosion of America. They Knew is a terrific book as well. How a culture of conspiracy keeps America complacent. All of these things help you see clearly how we ended up where we are. And her most recent book is spectacular, The Last American Road Trip. And through a series of road trips, literal road trips with her family, she tells the story of America, where we are, setbacks, beauty, the wonderment, the potential of America, and then, of course, the reality of where we are in many ways that fly in the face of all the positive. So anyway, so glad that she could be here. We'll comment on a bunch of stuff, but I just wanted to mention all of those because I'm such a fan. Sarah Kendzior, everyone. Hello, hello.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, really great for you to be here today. And gosh, there's so much going on. And, you know, I always talk about you in the context of having revealed so much about how we got here. And I do want to talk about what's going on today with the military going into American cities. And I want to get your take on all these things. But I'd love to just start with reminding people, in essence, it seems, I mean, in kind of an umbrella statement, you point out that Donald Trump was a concoction, in effect, of American media. There was complicity in both American media and American politics. Goes all the way to Biden and Garland, of course, but it extends well beyond that. And his sort of mafia instincts were well established. Well, David K. Johnston comes here every Tuesday, and we talk, and he's written, you know, volumes about it. But you also talked about it. So just I want to reset the table as to as well as you can in our short time how we got here, and then let's talk about what's going on.
Sure. Well, folks should read David K. Johnston's books. I reference them quite a lot in my own. And the fact that his books and his reporting are so old, as well as Wayne Barrett's, another reporter who covered Trump, going all the way back to the 1980s, this was all revealed in real time. You know, Donald Trump has been a mafia associate for his entire life. He was first investigated by the Department of Justice in 1973. So we're on the, past the half centennial of that. He was trained by mafia lawyer and hard right-wing political operative Roy Cohn, one of the most influential and notorious operatives of the 20th century. He has deep ties and secrets within the business world, entertainment world, media, politics. He flirted with running for president numerous times. He was not a political neophyte in 2016. He had thought about running in 1988, thinking about starting up a campaign again in 1996, ran briefly in 2000, ran briefly in 2012, and then, of course, ran in 2016, and then again in 2024. So this is someone with lifelong political goals, surrounded by some of the most nefarious and dangerous people in the world, in America and in numerous countries, in particular Russia, Israel, Saudi Arabia. I could just go on and on. And so there was no attempt by our government to stop him from taking power in a meaningful way. And that, to me, is the more interesting story, because we all now know Trump's biography. We know what he's capable of. We don't know the full story of why all of these alphabet agencies and congressional figures and so forth did not do their job to protect the American public from his openly stated destructive goals.
Yeah, you point this out, too, in many of your writings. Everything with Trump is up front. Yeah. That's part of what he does. You make this point repeatedly. Don't look for the hidden sleight of hand here. He is right up front with everything he wants to do and will do.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, he's a bulldozer for other people's interests. And this includes transnational organized crime, the worst people in Silicon Valley, the Heritage Foundation, and other right-wing groups, on and on. So he's a very effective front man for other people's operations. But in terms of just what is his plan? What does he want to do? He tells you over and over again. He confesses to crimes because in his view, it's not a crime if he does it. And that has always been something that he's outright stated. You could go back to the 2016 campaign with this infamous statement about shooting someone on Fifth Avenue and getting away with it. You could look at the times he confessed to obstruction of justice on national TV, twice to Lester Holt alone. This is not a subtle individual. And so when he was running for office again in 2024, one of the things that blew my mind is that the first time around, he could kind of get away with people falsely assuming that institutional norms and laws would hold, that the court and the Constitution would protect Americans from harm. We know that that's not true. It took a while for most Americans to catch on to that. But, we lived through 4 years of Trump already. Nothing was a hypothetical. And in 2024, when the Democrats were running and you asked, well, what's your plan, for example, if you lose? Like, what are you going to do to protect our country from an obvious authoritarian kleptocrat? And they would get so angry, like, how dare you ask us to have plans? How dare you ask us to do our jobs? And they are still that way. They're making little internet memes and, little jokes that do nothing to ward off the worst and most disastrous effects of this administration.
I mean, it feels like the horse is a little bit out of the barn, Sarah. I mean, maybe more than a little bit.
The horse's head is out of the barn. It's lying on our beds.
No, you're right. Exactly. So now with the American military being drawn into all of this, this is Trump's dream to be able to assert himself. The irony is insane, right? I mean, a guy who got out of military service has never had an hour of public service in his life, and yet he is now the commander-in-chief of the military, and he uses the military as a prop. I mean, I remember in his first term when he sent the military to the south border because of the caravan coming in, a bunch of guys in jeans and torn T-shirts, and we have to send these military guys there at Christmas time. I thought, my God, this is insulting to those men and women who are in the military, and now you have them in Washington, D.C., and we have them picking up trash. Albert, you have those pictures of them picking up trash and they're, beautifying the city. It's crazy, but it's all to assert a power that he wants to assert well beyond Washington, D.C.
Yes, absolutely. I've been taking note of what cities he's been approaching first. And my theory about this is that he's going after the wealthiest cities in the country. I think he's hoping that wealthy people flee the country. He started with LA, went to DC, is, making a move on Chicago soon. He, of course, wants to command the capital for other reasons. It's not just an intimidation tactic. It's not just to stoke a culture of fear. It's so that he has them at his beck and call. And so this is the point where we have to see what members of the military will comply to, whether they are willing to carry out something akin to a massive Kent state level attack on American civilians, or, deny Americans their constitutional right to protest, to assemble, to speak out against not just this administration, but to speak out, for example, against the genocide, happening in Gaza, which is something that, Trump's administration has tried to criminalize and tried to, criminalize free speech about that. So he's putting all these pieces in place. And again, I wish that there was, a plan in mind, because it was fairly obvious he was going to do this. But, the last I saw was the mayor of DC, I think, thanking him for helping to clean up the city, which one is not what our military officials should be doing. But also, this is the type of thing that, of course, happens in an autocracy where people are accustomed to security agents roaming the streets, violating their space, violating their sense of basic safety from the state. And now that is something that he's trying to normalize bit by bit by moving into one city after another.
Yeah, we're talking about the fact that he can say crime is down, and he can say, restaurant reservations are up. But the reality is actually to the contrary. Restaurant reservations way down, 60% down month to month. In other words, he's disrupted the rhythm of life in Washington because of this. The mayor of D.C., to your point, just actually admitted that Trump's involvement in D.C. has helped to lower crime. Now, let me just explain that with you, Sarah, meaning, please toss in on this, but as my understanding, Washington, D.C. is waiting on a huge tranche of money from the federal government, okay? So you can't tell me that the mayor of Washington is going to say anything but exactly what's out of the hymnal, because she wants that money. We're talking about a ton of money for her city. So if you want that Fed money, you're going to say, yes, sir. Oh, my God, what a great idea, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, they'll do that. I just wish that they would learn from the other people that Trump has extorted, bribed, blackmailed, threatened, which includes, a large number of private citizens, elected officials, universities, media outlets. In the end, he screws you over anyway. He might grant you some sort of temporary reprieve while you kiss his ass, but he's going to do what he wants to do, what serves his goals. And it doesn't matter how nice you treat him. What will happen is that citizens will now trust you less. They won't necessarily see this as some sort of tactic meant to benefit them. They'll see, a extreme attack on their daily way of life, the sort of rights that they exercise on a regular basis. They'll see lies uttered by this administration because crime was never that high to begin with. They see attacks on immigrants. This is happening in tandem with ICE and its roundup of immigrants. And DC is a very immigrant heavy city. A lot of people are living in fear. So it never does any good to try to suck up to an autocrat. He will just screw you over in the end. And he's done this to so many people for so many decades that I wish at the least they would just preserve their integrity and their dignity if he's going to try to steal everything else.
Speaking of preserving integrity, put that picture back up, integrity and dignity. Look at the people behind Donald Trump in this picture. I mean, these are rank incompetence. You can start with Pete Hegseth, go to Kristi Noem, J.D. Vance with an agenda driven by Peter Thiel, and Pam Bondi, who, again, is in way over her head, and she's been put in charge of everything. And she's just really doing the president's bidding at justice. So I wanted to play for you something just in case people had missed it. I'm sure you saw it, the cabinet meeting. And there's a part of this also, isn't there, Sarah, where he doesn't want to do anything that's not on television. So he'd like all of his cabinet meetings, he'd like every meeting, the Putin meeting, all of it to be televised, because that's really what he is a performer. And so this cabinet meeting was just, check your self-esteem at the door and humiliate yourself as you prostrate yourself in front of this guy and tell him how great he is. But here's a supercut of it, and then we'll pick up where we were.
Haven't stopped by the Department of Labor. Mr. President, I invite you to see your big, beautiful face on a banner in front of the Department of Labor, because you are really the transformational president of the American worker.
Working for this government, for you, is the greatest honor of my life. I tell it to everybody, and I really do feel that way, and I thank you.
You have breathed life back into the profession of law enforcement.
This is just such a great opportunity, really, to recognize your leadership as a true champion for working people.
Well, Mr. President, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to work for you.
Our country has never been so secure thanks to you. You have brought us back from the edge.
And there's only one thing I wish for, that Noble Committee finally gets its act together and realizes that you are the single finest candidate since the this Nobel Award was ever talked about.
Yeah, that's Nobel, by the way. Right.
Oh God. I mean, I actually hadn't seen that before. I heard about it. I didn't feel the need to watch it because I spent 15 years of my life studying Uzbekistan and watching footage of Uzbekistan's meetings when Islam Karimov, their lifelong dictator, was in charge. And they were exactly like this. It was apparatchiks sitting around a table, praising the glorious leader. And you'll see this at any kind of autocracy. And, I want to be clear that America is down the road towards authoritarianism, but we're not fully there, or you and I would not be having this conversation. Things can still get worse. But this aspect of it was obviously something that, Trump was going to pursue. I don't know how they do it with a straight face. I'm assuming, a large amount of money contributes to their willingness to prostrate themselves in this manner. But, I think a lot of them, it's kind of ironic. Trump's lifelong strategy was always to run out the clock, on every single investigation of him, every single crime you either thought of committing or had committed, just run out the clock on the judicial process. I think there's a lot of folks waiting in the wings, running out the clock on Trump. Like Towns Van Sant says, they are waiting around for him to die. And so they are, especially Vance and people like Peter Thiel and others who are backing him, they're looking to move this country in a very nefarious direction. And I think they're willing to humor Trump while he's there because they're thinking ahead towards quite possibly even worse goals, to terrify your audience too much. But honestly, as much as I, despise Trump, the people behind him, the donors, the backers, the big money people, they are who I actually am more afraid of than Trump, who, as you said, he's a performer. He's a front man. He's not the ideologue behind this. He's vicious. He's sadistic. He's amoral, but he is not the sort of generative cause for, he's not the reason exactly all this is happening. He is the vehicle to how this is happening.
I want to get to Epstein in a second because it's the, it's the magic bullet in effect, maybe. But before I do, I just want to follow up on that. Are those, when you say it could get so much worse with the people who are behind him, is that the Christo-fascist movement? Is it, where from a philosophical standpoint or from a strategic standpoint politically, where is that group coming from?
I think it's techno-fascism. I think the people that I am the most afraid of are those who want to eliminate humanity, like literally eliminate human beings and replace them with AI. That is why they're pushing AI so hard. It's why they're not bothering with existential threats like climate change. It's why they're letting, childhood diseases for which there are vaccines and cures reemerge. It's why they're denying healthcare. They have no respect for the sanctity of human life. It's also why they support genocide. And so they see what's happening to our, environment. They see what's happening to our political structures, this weakening that's not just in America, all over the world. And they basically want to hoard resources for themselves and their small group. And they don't care what happens to the rest of us. It's just incredibly inhumane. It doesn't really have precedent because of the way it crosses geographical borders, because of the way it disregards the idea of the nation state. I don't think that they're interested in necessarily preserving the existence of the United States of America or of its people. That makes them different than dictators of the past who were very committed to wiping out certain subsets, certain ethnic groups within, the boundaries of their nation and then expanding the nation outward. Here, I think there's an alliance, a transnational alliance of really frightening individuals from around the world that are committed to sort of a broader extinction racket. It's half kleptocracy, half sadism. It does have a religious element a lot of the times. You'll hear people invoke the rapture or the apocalypse or other things to kind of justify their motivation. And they'll hold up things like fires and floods and whatnot as proof, as proof that like the Bible is accurate and the end times are here. You should not build, domestic or foreign policy around the rapture. It's a very bad idea. Unfortunately, it's one that is embraced by this administration.
It's funny. It seems as though like that's an extreme position. It's obviously extreme, but like, where does that come from? But Curtis Yarvin, who's one of these guys who they sort of their North Star, these tech bros, he talks about it openly, exactly the way you've spoken of it.
Only he likes it. He's like a big fan because he assumes he'll be, in the group that gets to hang around. I mean, I think the world that they're set to create is, vile, but, you still want to have the option of continuing to exist. And they want to deny folks that option.
So the Epstein crisis is something that is real. It has rocked the MAGA boat, obviously. It is something that haunts Trump, feels as though it's something he can't skate away from except to distract from, which he is doing fairly effectively, I guess. And David K. Johnston was saying on the show a couple of weeks ago that he really feels, first of all, that this is going to reemerge when Congress comes back, of course, and that this is something that Trump cannot escape, meaning he just, if it can be made to stick, that there really is no way for Trump to evade the effects of this.
Yes. I wrote 2 books about Epstein and also about Epstein's relationship with Trump. It's a significant part of Hiding in Plain Sight and of They Knew. I also wrote and They Knew about Epstein's predecessor, Craig Spence, who also did a child rape trafficking blackmail network. And in Hiding in Plain Sight, I wrote about Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and her father, Robert Maxwell, who was a spy for Israel. He got a very lavish Israeli state funeral, who was also connected connected to a lot of the same mafia operatives that Trump's connected to. And then, of course, there's the big one, which the documents, again, are in my book, Hiding in Plain Sight, which was a 2020 bestseller, where Trump was accused of raping a 13-year-old girl who was procured by Epstein. So again, none of this is new. What I experienced after publishing these books is that I was censored. I had once been regularly on cable news because I had written a book about Jeffrey Epstein. Suddenly I had to go, and I wasn't being censored by Republicans. I mean, that was sort of always there. I was newly censored by, networks and stations that were sympathetic to the Democratic Party. They did not want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein. They did not want any examination of this. I found this baffling for a number of reasons. One is that this is a horrific criminal. This is a rapist. This is a trafficker. Of course you want to help his victims. Like, why would you not want to do that? Second of all, this is something that the entire country agrees is horrible. It's true that Trump's supporters have been following the Epstein case more attentively than the Democrats were, especially those who were in QAnon. In my book, They Knew, I write about how, the Republicans, in an attempt to try to divert all of that interest, came up with stuff like Pizzagate to try to say, this is to try to basically make anyone who looked into Epstein seem like some wild nut job who believed there were, child trafficking places and pizza parlors and things like that. Whereas the Epstein Maxwell case was real, real court cases, real indictments, real confessions, real victims. They wanted to bury the whole thing. So when it suddenly emerged, honestly, it scares me, because what I thought would happen is that Epstein would enter mainstream discourse when two things had happened. One was AI. One was AI with video and audio, so that if the quote Epstein files are released, if more information comes out, they'll simply deny it. They'll just say, oh, that's AI. That was made last week. This isn't real. We're now at a point far worse than a decade ago where people cannot tell fact from fiction. And there's so many, fake pieces of information floating out there. There's a real reason to challenge them. The other thing I feared is just total consolidation of power, where they thought that even Epstein, even this horror that the entire country can agree is just revolting and awful, it wouldn't actually necessarily bring him down. I think he certainly has lost a large chunk of his base. I watch them because our interests overlap. I've been following the Epstein case for a long time. They are disgusted. They feel betrayed. The Democrats who weren't aware of this because the mainstream media wouldn't cover it, they're also disgusted and they feel betrayed. So, we're united in betrayal. But, Congress and Trump and obviously the Republicans and the rest of them they do not seem to want to do anything meaningful about this, because I really doubt that this operation suddenly stopped with the alleged death of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sure it's continuing, and the blackmail material seems to still have an effect on, controlling or conditioning the reactions of various officials.
Well, that last point you're making about the blackmail material seems perfectly relevant to what you're talking about, which is the idea somehow that these files would be released and then there'd be questions about their veracity, that kind of thing. But the reality is they may not be released for that reason, as you suggest. Like, there's just so much damning stuff in there on both sides. And clearly, it's Democrats and Republicans and a lot of powerful people worldwide, maybe ties to overseas or domestic intelligence organizations. There's an awful lot here, Sarah, right?
Yes. Like I said, I've been studying this now for 10 years, and there's still information coming out recently that I didn't know about, and that other people like Julie K. Brown, who tracked Epstein and wrote about him for a long time, she didn't know about it. This guest book where Bill Clinton and Woody Allen and Trump and other people left messages for Epstein. There's new bits of information that seem to be, verified as real. I expect there to be ones that are not. They're going to try to muddy the waters. That's what they've always done with this case. I really wish that people would look at the historic antecedents for this. In particular, I wish they would look at Robert Maxwell and his life and his ties to various people in the Trump orbit, people like Iran-Contra figures, people like arms dealer Adnan Khashoggi. This was a little network that emerged in the late 1980s in which Trump Trump was involved. And one of the people who helped eliminate any investigation into this network was Bill Barr. He did this under the first Bush administration in the late 80s, early 90s, then of course returned for Trump to finish the job with Epstein allegedly committing suicide in prison. Bill Barr's father, of course, is the person who brought Epstein into the fold of New York high society, hired him as a teacher at a very fancy private school, from which he moved into, the world of high finance and so on. So Bill Barr obviously had a personal interest in having this all go away. A lot of reporting nowadays omits this context. They admit that Maxwell was someone who was very important to Israel, especially during this period. They won't go there. I think they're afraid of a lot of the new speech regulations about Israel, but the whole thing needs to come out. It can't just be in little bits and pieces. It needs to be like a full and interconnected story, because as complicated and difficult as it may be, that's simply the truth of it.
You know, the adjunct to that is that Blanche meeting with Maxwell. So the number 2 person at the Justice Department goes down and meets with Ghislaine Maxwell, which on its face, just stop the music right there. Why is that happening? Why is that meeting happening? Unless there was all this, as they said, public interest in what she had to say. And then she comes forward with a statement that looked as though it was, scripted on cue cards. And we played the audio, and of course they had an interest in getting the audio out, which is another thing that's odd. Why do you play that audio? Why do you release that audio of Blanche and Maxwell? And then, again, this goes to what you were saying and what you've written about, which is the, in plain sight aspect of moving her to an even more minimum security prison. What is it, a day or 2 days after she makes that statement? Was insane. I mean, it just so clearly was quid pro quo.
Yeah, and it's the same thing that they did for Epstein. He never really went to prison. He had this very loose kind of house arrest. I think it's interesting that one of Maxwell's lawyers is Roy Cohn's cousin, from what I read. There's a lot of nepotism involved in these networks. You see it with the Trump family, the Kushner family, the Maxwell family, and now the Roy Cohn family. And the reason for that is that this is a mafia state, and mafias are very insular. So are dictatorships, but they need to keep those secrets. They need to be with people who can keep their mouths shut. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about actual conspiracies, actual plots, is that somebody will eventually spill. Someone will give up the game. They actually are very good at keeping their mouths shut for a very long time on certain subjects. And that frightens me. Trump occasionally will blurt things out about certain, crimes he committed, largely those in office. But I think because with Epstein, it's a matter of children and a matter of rape. And there's, sort of universal taboos that it doesn't matter who you voted for or what party you're in or whatnot. Everybody finds this repulsive and very upsetting to hear about, and they don't want to be associated with that. And I think that that's the thing, but that also prompts people to keep their mouths shut in uniform. And that disgusts me so much. That's the thing that I think people don't want to get out, is that not everybody adjacent to the Epstein case was somebody involved in it in the sense of they were a perpetrator, they were a rapist or a client or whatnot. They were witnesses. They were people who knew fully well it was happening. They did nothing to stop it, whether just as somebody that was observing, whether as a member of the media who didn't write a story, whether as an official who did not try to prosecute or do so in a timely fashion. They're all complicit. They're all guilty. And I think they know that the American public will be full of rage, both for the case in its own right, but also because it represents this broader culture of elite criminal impunity, where if you have a certain amount of money and you're in a certain network, you can do absolutely anything you want. And what they apparently want to do is rape children. And that is something that's so terrifying that's what you would do. You have billions of dollars. You could do anything you want in the world. That's what you're choosing to do. Why would anybody do that? Why would anyone go along with it and not try to bring it to a stop? It's hard for any normal moral person to comprehend it.
I mean, so many shattered lives. It really was horrors perpetrated over a long period of time by so many different people and so many interlocking pieces in that. And in our last minute or two, I want to pivot to finally Russia. Okay, Russia, Putin, and Trump. You've also written extensively about this, and I wonder if you could just give us your sense of what's happening, the Ukraine Russia conflict obviously is the pivot point, but there may be more going on here between Putin and Trump.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is a Russian mafia asset, and he has been for a very long time. Trump Tower functioned in the 1980s as basically a dorm for the Russian mafia after they left the Soviet Union and needed a place to go. So Trump has been hooked up in this criminal network for, decades on end. What he's doing now in terms of his relationship with Putin, I think has to do with a variety of interconnected deals between dictators around the world. I think an agreement was made with Trump for Putin to, quote, have Ukraine, basically be allowed to, illegally invade Ukraine and take the eastern part of that territory. And in exchange, Russia will hold back on, perhaps an Iran war. This is one of my fears, is that an Iran war is brewing and that Russia, which would traditionally, defend Iran, perhaps is agreeing to hold its fire because Trump is very willing to give Ukraine. And that is how they see the world. They don't care about the Ukrainians living in Ukraine. They don't care about us living in America. They don't care about people, regular people anywhere in the world. And they will, take land, take resources, take money. It's a mafia network that runs on theft and impunity.
So his inability to get a deal, the real idea there is just to stall to allow Putin more time to win the war of attrition, or what's your take on that?
I think that's part of it. I also think that there are a lot of oligarchs and plutocrats who enjoy watching Ukrainians and Russians kill each other. They enjoy the weakening of both militaries because then it makes it easier for, corruption to thrive in the midst. And if, whole cities, whole regions are destroyed, then they can go in afterwards and look for, certain valuable minerals, take over land. Ukraine is famous for its soil. I think that there are kind of outside, really vicious, predatory people doing this. Trump was trained by corporate raiders. He was mentored also by people like Carl Icahn, who had this philosophy of you break things, you destroy things, and then you buy them on the cheap. That is how he views countries. That is how the people around him who are advising him view countries as well. And the people who get killed or hurt in that situation, they don't matter to them at all. They're just incidental.
So as you game out this Ukraine-Russia thing, you think with all those interests to which you've referred, it's likely that we won't see a cessation of hostilities for a while?
I don't know how long this will go on, because while there's, kind of, I don't want to say fake things, but I think there's a sort of mafia war, an internal war that maybe we're not seeing the full scope of. We're also seeing actual Ukrainians fighting for their land, fighting, with great determination, and they're not going to just sit back and let it be stolen. And then we also have Russia doing, the typical thing that an imperialist dictatorship does, where, they have claimed this territory as theirs. They have deemed it Russian. They're not going to back down either. And the Russian population feels that way as well. Like I said, I don't think these plutocrats and oligarchs are particularly concerned with public opinion, but that doesn't mean that, people within these militaries share the goals of those oligarchs. They might be fighting for a completely different cause, and that's going to complicate whatever kind of objectives the, puppet string masters might have. It's that, there are people underneath this, those people don't matter to them, but people matter to each other, and their countries matter to them, and they will fight for their countries in various ways. But, the casualty count is growing, and, it did not end under Biden. I think the best way to have ended this would have been quick, but it's been drawn out for a long time, and I think they must see some advantage in that, as grim as it is. So I really can't say. It's hard to say.
Just to follow up on the last thing you said, and then I'll let you go. You feel as though Biden held back on offensive weapons, or in essence, he kind of kept them on the defense?
Yes, I think so. I mean, he seemed to know, or at least it's not even really him, it's his foreign policy staff, that this war would drag on unless Ukraine was adequately armed to fend off the attack, that Russia would continue to, move further into Ukrainian territory. I think Ukraine surprised everybody by fending them off as strongly as they did, especially in those first few weeks where people were, they're expecting like Kiev to fall, and it didn't. And so that was an opportunity, I think, to bolster Ukrainian military initiatives. And, I want to be clear, like, I do not support any war. I would rather this not be happening at all. I take no enjoyment out of any of this. But if there's a clear-cut war, if there's a clear-cut case of, there's an outside force invading and people would like to defend themselves, it is Russia and Ukraine. And I don't think that America did an adequate job of understanding that dynamic or respecting, the willingness of Ukrainians to sacrifice for their country. And as a result, a lot of lives have been lost that I don't think needed to happen. I think all around, it's just a tragedy. And one more thing I'd like to add is that on the Russian end, Russia, under Putin, has been sending out ethnic minorities, from its territories to fight this war. They've been using them as basically, people to take the fire while they just kick back and enjoy the riches and the conquering of territory. So it's a tragedy for Russia as well.
Sarah Kendzior, just such a fan. And look at this, everybody. Dang, bring Sarah on weekly, says Scott. Yeah. How about Sarah Kendzior is wonderful, says Katz. Yeah, you're going to see tons of this. It's unreal. Several. Can Sarah be a weekly guest, please, says Joy. You really are terrific. I know your schedule's busy, but we'll put the call out again and hope that you can come through a little more frequently than we've seen you in the past. We'll have links to all of your books and your Substack, where I am a full-fledged member at the Substack as well. So again, I'll have links under this video, and I wish you all the best and the best to your family, whom I've read about in your latest book. And I'm looking forward to the next time. Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me back.
All the best. Sarah Kendzior, everybody. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Who's Mark Thompson?
Feels good. When they raided Mar-a-Lago, God didn't like that.
Love it. Thank you for being here. We are a live show coming to you from California in the USA. We are on from 11 to 1 in the West, 2 to 4. Where are my East Coasters? What's up, East Coast? Love my East Coast. And all across the world, a 2-hour live show. You can join in the chat. You can support this show just by your interaction. Doesn't cost you anything. And please hit the like button. That is the way on YouTube anyway. As you watch live, you're able to support the show. And that doesn't cost anything. Just
with your iron rod.
Smash it like a boss. And if you want to support this show, you can do it through Patreon and PayPal. Those are the two ways in which we have a community of supporters that keep us on the air. We have the names of everybody who supports us in Patreon and PayPal. If we've missed your name somehow and you're one of those people, please send me an email and we'll make sure that we get you in there. But we run those names at the end of every show because you make this show possible. Without you, we just couldn't do it. So thank you so much, Patreon and PayPal community. Richard Delamater says, love you, bro. Glad you're better. Hang in there. Yeah, I wish I was better. I'm well enough to be here and to hang out a little while. Lucy McAllister, hello, everyone. Lucy, big shout out to you.
Big shout out.
My favorite McAllister. Wow. A $10 super chat. Not bad. 7 to 9 GMT. Thank you for the GMT adjustment. Sports Hatch. We will now list us in all the publications as GMT 7 to 9. Hello from Western New York. Love my Western New York. Buffalo, New York, where I started my full-time career.
That's a chilly place.
What?
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I mean, the weather was pretty bad. I love Buffalo. Buffalo's a great community. Western New York's a terrific place. Donald Trump, in my opinion, is the biggest enemy of democracy in my lifetime, says Vilma. You think? No offense, Vilma, but yeah, exactly. Ding, 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 ding. All right. Add that statement to Trump's cabinet meeting. Oh, I see. Vilma saying, yeah. Okay, I have one more thing. Yeah, I'm Vilma Devlin. Right. Mr. Trump, you're the greatest threat to democracy and enemy of democracy in my lifetime. Thanks. Chaplain Fred says with a $10 super chat, hi, Mark and Kim. I said it before and I'll say it again. I like anything that starts with I said it before and I'll say it again. I think it's a great way. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can start a musical number with that, right? Or you can start an intense speech that way, or just a closing statement. You can stick the landing with, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do not know how these people can say what they say on what Trump wants to do with a straight face and how they support the apocalyptic ideology. Yeah, well, they do it for power. Power is an insanely effective way to keep people in line. I mean, they're in charge of some very big stuff. And, I've been to the White House twice, and I've been at official functions twice. And it's intoxicating. It's unreal. You can't visit the White House unless they do a background check on you. You have to submit all these materials, and then they clear you in. And you realize as you drive up that driveway, this is a serious institution and a serious seat of power. Now, in my view, it's been degraded by the people who have now become residents of that White House and in that cabinet and running these major institutions of American life. But that said, it is truly intoxicating to be around that. And if you're given the kind of power, look at the budget that Kristi Noem is in charge of. She just had her budget supercharged in that huge appropriations bill. And this woman who's incompetent, it doesn't matter woman, man, but I'm just saying this person, because I know people are going to jump on me. Why did you say this woman? My God, Mark, you're such... Okay, so this person, Kristi Noem, she's in charge of all of this money. And she's in all these commercials, radio and television commercials, telling you what a great job. She's been vaulted into American life and can really affect American life in such an enormously powerful way. Well, that's intoxicating. So all the people in that cabinet meeting are some version of that. And I'd suggest to you that that's one of the true ways that you're incentivized to kiss Trump's ass, because that's the guy who you have to ingratiate yourself to. And then you go back to your office, and if you're Tulsi Gabbard, you're running intelligence for the entire country. I mean, it's worldwide intelligence. It's remarkable, the power that's been given these people who are of questionable competence to be kind. Pete Hegseth makes some impassioned statements in that cabinet meeting. That's easy for him. That's a layup for Pete Hegseth. Loves that stuff. That's what he's best at. Some performative thing. The theater of it all is what these people are really best at. It's where they've come from, right? Pam Bondi, they all come from Fox News Channel. And so Hegseth's incompetence is immaterial. He makes these statements, it looks good in the moment, and then he goes back to the Pentagon, he doesn't know, he can't find his butt with both hands. Mm-hmm. So that's the situation, I think, in answer to the question, how can people, I know you meant it rhetorically, but how can people, humiliate themselves and pay this guy compliments that way? Because it's a power grab. They want to be part of the power grab.
On the topic of Trump's crew of incompetence, did you hear about the U.S. envoy to Lebanon? His name is Tom Barrack. And he's giving a press conference, and he's standing in front of Middle Eastern journalists, and they're all shouting questions because that's what they do. I mean, it's a throng, right? They're all hollering out questions, and he freaks out and basically refers to them as animalistic and says that we don't have to be standing up here. It's not worth anything to us economically to be here for you. And he gets a big pushback, and now everywhere he goes, after making an international incident out of what should have been an easy press conference, now there's protests everywhere he's going. He's now ineffective at whatever job he was sent to do the Middle East to do. It's another example of the people Trump hires and how they're not qualified and they shouldn't be in those positions.
Yeah, I mean, it was insulting. This is a U.S. envoy. This is what we talk about. I'll get to David Katz in just a second, but we talk about the fact that the State Department's been cored out. All these people with all this training and diplomacy, all this institutional knowledge of the regions that they're dealing in, they're all gone. He fired them all. So, in your Doge dream about going through with a chainsaw and just, wantonly wielding it, getting rid of people, that's what you end up with. You end up with rank amateurs handling some of the most serious regions in the world.
Yeah.
They have no institutional understanding. They have none of that training to which I've referred. I mean, Witkoff, who you heard talking about the Nobel Prize, I wish the Nobel Prize committee could really see the great work you do. I think you're the greatest candidate for the Nobel that since they created the Nobel Prize. And he didn't know what it was called, Nobel Peace, whatever. You could see him flummoxed a little bit. Not to mention, he doesn't even know it's called the Nobel Prize, not the Nobel Prize. But that guy is a golfing buddy of Trump's. He is not a diplomat. He has no training in diplomacy. Google it. Look at it. This guy is a fraud. And because he's a golfing buddy of Trump's and he's a billionaire, he's a real estate billionaire, he's sent to the Middle East, to Russia, to Ukraine to handle all of these negotiations. It's an affront to all professionals who work in that field.
No, they think because they are, able to negotiate high value real estate deals that somehow equates to being able to be diplomatic and have these long, sensitive details worked out among nations. And it's not the same thing.
Indeed. Luis says, questionable competence. Come on, Mark. It's an effing clown show. Example, the head of education for the nation is talking steak sauce, A1, rather than AI. Yeah, she didn't really understand what AI was when she saw it in her notes. She was just given these notes as she became. Yeah, I mean, that was just, it's a political appointment of the sort that, friend of Trump kind of thing. Dillette, thank you. Dillette Ziegelman Jackson with a $20 super sticker. And might I say, thank you, Sese Ma.
Thank you so much.
And I also shout out to Dillette because she
Big shout
actually, I think, has more of the new Mark merch than anybody else on the planet. Harry Magnan with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Sarah. I love her books. Oh, thank you for Sarah. I love her books. Can you persuade her to be a weekly guest? I hope. It's all Kim. Kim's the Sarah whisperer.
Yeah, I'm trying.
We'll see. All right. I cannot thank you guys for recognizing Sarah is brilliant. So we'll get her back.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world. You hear him on British radio and television. You also see him on News Nation, and as I say, in New Zealand and Australia. He is someone who is so generous to come with us on Thursdays and throw in on so many of the legal issues affecting this country. The former federal prosecutor, now defense lawyer. He is the great David Katz. Everyone, hi, David.
Great to be with you.
So great to have you here. So I want to start with what's happening at the Fed board, where Donald Trump has fired this Fed board governor, and yet it seems as though he has no legal standing to do that. I know legal standing is really a technical term, but I mean, he has no legal high ground, might be another way to put it, to do that. And she's going to sue to retain her job.
Well, it's great that she's going to sue. He pushed a woman, I forget her name, off of the Fed board.
Lisa Cook, is it? Yeah.
She went quietly back to her university post.
Oh, that's a different person. Yeah.
And so, of course, that emboldened Trump, like everything. And for the what's really going on, and no one should be deceived. What's really going on? This is performative, to the extent that Trump loves this. Trump remembers that it was a black female DA who went after him with what he considered a lot of black females and many, many others like me rooting for the prosecution. But he remembers a black female who went after him down there in Atlanta. And he remembers a black female who went after him and collected that huge judgment against him, which the appellate court just threw out. So it's like, and he likes the whole thing about, you know, they took a technicality and they turned it into a case against me. That would be the black DA down in New York City. So to railroad the first black person to ever be on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors in Washington, D.C., he loves that. That's the revenge that he promised. And that was the revenge that many of his white nationalist MAGA supporters voted for. Let's not kid ourselves for a minute. They think this is great stuff and they love the optics and they don't care how railroaded the charges are. Now, the charges are complete garbage, Mark. I defended these kinds of cases. There are federal prosecutive guidelines for what's called mortgage fraud. And under the guidelines, you don't go after a person who does it once or even twice. There are serial mortgage defrauders, and what they do is they'll buy 10 units somewhere. They'll claim that each unit is their personal residence. Then they'll get a slightly lower interest rate from the bank. But what the hell? They're crooks. They want to save money, make money anywhere they can. And so I defended somebody who did this in Marina Del Rey out here. He got some beautiful apartments in the Marina Center, claimed he was going to live in all of them, and it was a commercial endeavor. None of these people have done that. So she's not within the prosecutive guidelines. And of course, let me not miss the headline. She's never been prosecuted for anything. They've never even brought a complaint against her. So the idea that he could remove her for cause, this is absolutely not cause. But the reason that people are so scared of this case, including a whole bunch of very conservative Republican people who invest in the stock market, is that Trump is really threatening the stock market and the stability of the United States. You may say, well, that's hyperbole, but it's not hyperbole. If he can force her on these shoddy grounds, or if he can get her removed from the Fed, the country's economy is in trouble because every president, Trump worse than others, but every president wants low interest rates. It helps them. That may greatly add to inflation, but the low interest rates tend to help them when they really need it, like when they're running for election, a whole lot more than the steady crush of inflation, right? And so they always opt for these low interest rates. And the reason that someone stands up to them wanting to have low interest rates, from them wanting to trash the currency as it was in the 30s, talk about people who compare this to the 30s. The reason that we don't have to worry about our economy being trashed, our currency becoming like it is in Argentina or Mexico at times, is because we have the Federal Reserve. They're independent and they stand up for the people and the economy. And believe me, the Wall Street traders appreciate that. The retirees who are living on fixed incomes or on savings appreciate that. But this issue, Mark, could go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's where people think it's headed. And Trump's only argument that's going to work is the nuclear argument, which is that there's a unitary executive. He controls everything in the executive branch. There is no executive official, whether they're at the FTC, they're at the EPA, or they're at the Federal Reserve, who can stand against the unitary theory, which is that he can remove any executive official that he wants to. End of story. So he can remove her, he can remove Powell, he can destroy the Federal Reserve, he can destroy the currency of the United States. And the Supreme Court may go right down that primrose path, Mark, because they have indicated in one dictum that the Federal Reserve may be different. But I'd like to hear some scholar explain to me why the Federal Reserve is different, because we need it more. I don't know. We need the EPA and the FTC pretty bad. So why is it any different? If there's a unitary executive and everybody in the executive branch works for him and can be fired by him, why are the Federal Reserve governors different? And that's why the stock market is about to freak out. That's why the traders on our currency are about to freak out. That's why the dollar is going to go down just on the threat that he can remove her.
Already has dipped. And this is an interesting thing that you're saying, because essentially you're forecasting that his concierge court at the Supreme Court will uphold his desire to have control over the Fed. And that turns us into, I don't know, Turkey or something like, some country like that, where you have 80% inflation at the end of all of it, because the rates are, you have a dictator or a dictatorial regime, essentially keeping the interest rates low and in our case printing money. So that's inflationary by definition.
That's exactly what they do. In Argentina, other countries like that, nobody wants to hold the national currency. They want to hold dollars because the Federal Reserve has kept the dollar strong. And so this is something that, rich people, conservative people really care about, but it's pure MAGA. Now, in terms of some off-ramps, a lot of the off-ramps are really ugly. One of the off-ramps is that they could agree to a moderate replacement. She could step aside. They really misunderstood the data. They could do something that was face-saving for her. And so it never ends up being that U.S. Supreme Court decision. Maybe they can find some doctrine on the U.S. Supreme Court to get around this, that it's not ripe. It sure seems like people have standing. She's about to get fired. He's firing her. It seems like the two people have loads and loads of standing, but they will try very hard, the U.S. Supreme Court, concierge court or not, to not make that call that he can fire even the members of the Federal Reserve, because that is the beginning of the end of the strength of the American dollar.
The SCOTUS already ruled in a previous ruling. Randy says that the Fed is different and not subject to the whims of the president. Is that the case?
I love Randy, and that's what we lawyers call dictum. If we know a few more things from having gone to law school for 3 years than the average very intelligent person out there, it's this idea of dictum, the idea that courts really only decide what they have to decide, and anything which is not crucial to the holding in the case is dictum. So it's very nice that they said that about the Federal Reserve, but it wasn't a Federal Reserve governor who was at issue there. And therefore, what would they do with the Federal Reserve? Look at the statute. Maybe the statute's different. But as I say, the statute may be different. It's totally unprecedented. No president has ever tried to remove, much less removed, a Federal Reserve governor. But, the fact that it's unprecedented doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. And if the unitary theory is right, and the Supreme Court seems to be moving in that direction, I mean, it was shocking when they allowed the FTC, the EPA. I think in some of those cases, they claimed they weren't really ruling. They were just denying a stay, which as a practical matter, they thought that somehow the government would be harmed more, prejudiced more, Mark, if they didn't grant the stay than if they did grant the stay that kept the person in their job. And that is so fatuous. I mean, the idea that, you're supposed to not have your job for a year and a half, and the government's prejudiced by you having your job for a year and a half. So since the Supreme Court went that way on the stay, they were saying that they thought the merits would go that way, but they weren't actually ruling. And by the way, God bless this cook that's holding her ground and that's standing on this. And as I say, there may be a perfectly logical explanation for this supposed saying that two different places were her principal residence. As I understand it, she was a professor in Michigan, and she also had some interest in Georgia. Maybe, for all we know, she thought, maybe the Michigan job wasn't going to work out. So on day one, she says, I'm a permanent resident or plan to be a resident of Michigan. And then, like a lot of people, she says, you know what? I got this offer from Georgia. I'm going to buy this place down in Georgia. Now I got to check the box. Is this going to be my place I plan to live or not be the place where I plan to live? Well, 2-3 weeks later, because of changes in what was going on between her desire to live in Michigan and her desire to live in Georgia, she very honestly checked the box that she planned to live in Georgia. But in any event, these one house or two houses, these are not within federal prosecutive guidelines. It may also be that if this, I don't know who that is.
It might be an Amber Alert or something. You probably have to pick it up and recognize it. Otherwise, it'll keep going off.
Sorry, Mark.
No, not at all.
That was for the building here, I guess.
I see.
So, or maybe it was just my phone.
So they're not within, even if this were a violation, it's not within prosecutive guidelines, is what you were saying.
It could be. Let me give you another example. It used to be that the FBI would go after people who stole a car. So some guy would tap out in Vegas. He'd have no money. He'd steal a car to drive back to L.A. That was half of the docket under J. Edgar Hoover, it seemed like, that they would bring. So they passed a prosecutive guideline which says, look, we don't want half the FBI's cases to be some guy who stole a car in one state and drove it to another state. We want commercial things. We want a guy who steals 4 cars. Maybe you want a guy who steals luxury cars of a certain value. So there are prosecutive guidelines. Then they say in extraordinary circumstances, you could go after the person anyway. That's not what they meant by extraordinary circumstances in any of these things where they say don't go with the prosecutive guidelines because there may be extraordinary circumstances. Extraordinary circumstances in bureaucratese does not mean the president really, really doesn't like this person. But I say it again, Mark, the optics of her being a black woman, it is so outrageous. And she's trumping out there. There's another black woman that he fired from some other agency. This should not be lost.
Well, I mean,
the optics of this are not lost on maggot. It shouldn't be lost on anybody. What a big part of, and Washington, D.C. and that whole thing, the black people can't run their city when they're actually running it very well and they're running it safer than it was run years ago, and crime is going down. And what a joke. You think they're going into Anacostia and fighting the gangs? Not that I want that. But what a joke. They sit around in Northwest. They sit around in fancy places like the National Mall. And it's nothing but performative. It also costs over $1 million a day. Not that anyone seems to care about money anymore, but it does cost. Remember the old days when conservatives talked about how much money federal things cost?
Where's the Department of Waste, Fraud, and Abuse?
Pose posture and perform.
But just on this, the mortgage thing, 2 points. One is, they haven't produced any evidence. These are allegations without evidence. And he has, then see point number 2, he's firing somebody without there being even formal charging. They're just investigating this Federal Reserve Board governor. So it may be
cause.
It might be specious, but yeah, it's odd.
Not cause. No, it's not cause. Trump will lose in the district court. Trump will lose in the Court of Appeals. He'll go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if it's still a live issue and the Supreme Court can't get out of it on lack of ripeness or something else like that, then that's when the rubber really hits the road. Sure. Even the concierge Supreme Court won't want to do it. All these, that 6-3 majority, they have more rich friends, Mark, than you and I will.
Yeah,
ever
where are the
have.
oligarchs when you need them? All right,
where are the oligarchs? And they want to save the oligarchs because they'll all do it. They'll all do it, Mark. It is too tempting to trash the dollar, print money, if the Federal Reserve doesn't stand in your way. And he plans to put people on there who are not going to stand in his way.
Sure, this is exactly what they're doing at the CDC with the cleaning house there, and that's what they've done across the board. There's no pushback in any way. And just the last point. This is the new weaponization of this mortgage thing that we've found through Trump's henchman there at housing and finance. He has done the same thing, dusted off Adam Schiff's mortgages. He's going for this mortgage thing as a way to go after political enemies, clearly. But again, they're not formal charges. They're just investigations announced, which is kind of a Trump thing. Remember, even at the end of the 2016 term in the 2020 election, where he said, "I don't need you to actually say to prove that the election had some irregularities. I just need to have you announce." This is to his temporary Justice Department head, the Attorney General. "I just need you to announce that there's an investigation into irregularities." So I think this is kind of a kind that way.
He was going to take that Jeffrey Clark, who's got a bunch of legal problems and apparently well-deserved. He was going to vault him over the very conservative heads of the Justice Department, but not who are willing to do that piece of dirty business for Trump. And he was going to say to Clark, "I'm going to vault you over them. Just issue the issue the letter that says we're suspicious, and then my Republican Congress members will take it from there." You remember that fiasco? And he was actually named the acting attorney general on, I guess, a piece of stationery or something like that. But they all threatened to resign. And you needed people like that. And I think you were saying at the lead-in, you don't have people like that. I mean, this is the worst cabinet. The cabinet is so feckless, so self-serving, so obsequious. Mark, it's just unbelievable. And these shows that he puts on, you hope that the average person, the swing voter in America, says, "This is garbage. We don't want this. We don't want like a Mussolini, surrounded by his fawning, what are they called? Acolytes, fawning wannabes." And there's so many crooked deals in all this. I just can't resist saying about two people. One is RFK Jr. Thank God I'm over 65. I still get all the shots. But what he's doing to younger people, you got to be really aware. And there's another person who's just been fired. He wanted to fire somebody. She said, I'm not going. And then Trump came out and said, I'll fire her, which clearly is something that the president can do. That's certainly an executive office that the president can fire.
Well, I think he relishes the opportunity actually to fire people publicly. It reinforces his power. It reinforces don't mess with us.
That's the great performance. But you're fired, like on his old show. But this Pult, P-U-L-T-E, who is the head of this obscure little agency and who keeps claiming that he's finding mortgage fraud all over the place, huge Republican donor from Michigan. One thing that's interesting is that some of the Democrats voted for him. And so in fairness to all sides, why did a couple of Democratic senators vote for this Pult guy, this head, the one who's making all this trouble for Schiff and these other people? I think they're going to have a lot of explaining to do why 3 or 4 Democratic senators voted for this P-U-L-T guy, this millionaire. What campaign contributions did he give to them? I mean, let's be fair all around. And this guy is absolutely dangerous because the case on Adam Schiff is total garbage. If the one on Cook, they know that a Congress member has to have 2 residences, especially if they're from California. The banks were told this only works. It's true that you could go after somebody for just one. You could legally go after Cook for what she did, even though prosecutive guidelines are that you don't, because it wasn't commercial and there's so many logical explanations for it. But the thing is that the bank has to be deceived. The public doesn't lose any money. It's the bank that gives you a 0.5 point better interest rate if it's your home where you live than if it's a spec house. They knew very well. I mean, Schiff had a lawyer. He had an explanation to both banks that he was a Congress member. And so he lived largely in California and he lived largely in Washington, D.C. Here was the situation. Of course, in none of these cases did anyone lose a dime. In none of these cases did the person stop paying the mortgage anywhere. But the Schiff one, he is absolutely clean. And that this Pulte guy, P-U-L-T-E, I think he's a big company in Michigan there too. This P-U-L-T-E.
Yeah, he
guy.
comes out of it. He's another jillionaire in the Billionaire Boys Club crew. And then,
he's a Nepo guy. He's a guy like Trump too. This is all Nepo money.
Yeah, that's right. His family. David's exactly right. He comes from a family fortune, real estate fortune, and he is true MAGA. And he's found this thing that he can weaponize, and so he's turned it on Schiff. He's turned it on this Lisa Cook at the Fed, and that's just the beginning because he has access now to all of this mortgage information. So yeah, this is going to be his jihad. But as you say, it's all just allegations. There are no actual charges being offered. I got to move along. Take me to Florida's Alligator Alcatraz. It looks like it is going to be closing. I guess Ron DeSantis is appealing the order by the federal court that this detention camp in the Florida Everglades, which is particularly known for the harsh conditions, has to be dismantled within 60 days. Can you speak to that?
I heard that Florida is not actually pushing it, that Florida is giving up. I may be wrong on that, but I think Florida has pretty much agreed to close it down because it also presents all kinds of state problems. People may enjoy or grimace at the irony of this, but apparently the environment has more rights than the poor people who are dragged in there, have their rights violated, don't have attorneys, but it's the
what a great way to say it. That's a great way to say it.
It's the damage and danger to the environment. Yeah. It's and Florida has actually spent millions and millions of dollars under Democrats and Republicans to preserve the Everglades. You know, it's kind of like an American Amazon that, thank God, we're doing something to preserve. And among the horrors of that place were the damage that it did to the environment that Florida, I think, really cares about. So I think Florida has said, you know what, Trump loved this. He loved the idea of, people who weren't born in this country being eaten by alligators if they tried to escape from this particularly horrible prison. You know, even when they had the waterboarding, I thought we'd reach the nadir when we went around the world looking for places that would waterboard our detainees and not tell tales. But this was, of course, the most grotesque one yet. And the image that Trump wanted to portray of, wow, you come to this country, you might get eaten by an alligator. In fact,
why export our black ops?
We'd like it if you got eaten. We'd like it if you got eaten by an alligator.
Yeah, we can do cruelty just as well as the Saudis. We don't have to export our black ops. Now to the flag burning. This is J.D. Vance actually says, I know the Supreme Court, said that torching the American flag is protected free speech, but I don't think it should be. And he is supporting Trump's new crusade against flag burning. Again,
one of these conservative schools has the Scalia School of Law. I think that the right wingers should immediately strike Scalia's name off of there, call it the Vance School of Law, because it was Scalia who famously joined that decision, because it is a type of free speech. And it's a type of free speech because to some extent, you can have conduct that emphasizes your free speech point. Now, of course, it has to be reasonable. You can't burn down a building with a flag on it to make your point. But you can burn a flag to make your point that, if your point is, I hate America, I disrespect America, down with America, that part of that expression, which I totally disagree with, is that you can burn the flag. And that's what they said in that famous decision. Kennedy joined it. By the way, I had the pleasure to argue in front of Kennedy several times. Unfortunately, not on the U.S. Supreme Court, but when he was on the Ninth Circuit, I seemed to draw him on my appeals all the time. Kennedy, who was conservative, joined that. Scalia, who was their most famous conservative, joined that because it is expressive conduct. And the Supreme Court is not going to reverse that. What they want to do, they say, is to run around and find instances. Let's say you burn a bunch of stuff and the flag is among it. That they would go after you, not because you burned a lot of stuff, but they would pick you out of the people who burn a lot of stuff if you had a flag in there and they thought that was really your intent, was to burn the flag along with the other stuff. They would charge you with some kind of misdemeanor.
Well, that's right? What I said the other day when he made it. I said they're going to find ways to charge. Even the guy who burnt the flag, they arrested him. So you're going to have to figure out something, you're disturbing the peace or public burning or something. I don't know. But
it'll lead the news. It'll lead the news, Mark. Trump is against burning the American flag.
Right.
He screwed you out of your Medicare benefits, your Medicaid. You're living on the street, but God damn it, he's doing something about people are burning a flag 100 miles away. And you should vote for this man. You should somehow get to the polls if the polls are working right. If he hasn't screwed up the polls or screwed up the voting. Putin says a terrible thing how we vote in America, and of course, there's an expert opinion we want to live by.
The madness is on display. But it is true what you've just said, and you did it in a kind of fun way, sort of running down those things that it's almost laughable. But it's a political winner for Trump to say, hey, I'm against flag burning. I'm a patriot. And this is the paper patriotism or performative patriotism that typifies a lot of what he does. And even the presence of troops in Washington. I'm against crime, and I'm here to shut this crime down in Washington. Bondi with that statement, we're going to stop crime in Washington today. It stops today. These are again, performative declarations, but again, political winners, I'd suggest, because most of the country goes, hey, MAGA Nation or those GOP or those who are just Trump supporters say, what's so wrong with it? So you get to, the country's got crime problems in some of these cities, and the president's doing something about it. I get it. You libs don't like that? Now, tough. They're cleaning up homelessness, and they're cleaning up the parks, and they're making Washington a better city than it was prior to what Trump did.
But the joke is that, I'm a former federal prosecutor. I've been doing this it's not my first rodeo. Organized criminals are very good at avoiding even narcs, even potential snitches. Even a cop that they have some lookout find. The idea that they're going to, they're going to be deterred where the army is actually walking by as they're walking down in Northwest, down a posh street. Yes, they're not going to carjack on that street. And it is such an ineffective way to fight crime. It is so unbelievably, excessively expensive and so inefficient. It really could only come from Trump. One of the things is that he has no one to give him advice that this is a clown show. You look terrible. And of course, he looks terrible all over the world. He doesn't look terrible to some of the MAGA base. But, I think you were talking about this in the lead-in, Mark. Looking terrible to the rest of the world is an enormous price that America's paying. My father was a veteran. I got a high number, so I didn't have to go in. But we really do respect people's service. We really do respect America's influence in the world. And this is so terrible. I can see a future which is optimistic, but I can see a future which is very grim. especially if we don't reverse what Trump is doing pretty quickly. I mean, I can see a Latin America, we have very friendly Latin America with all the problems that we've had in Cuba and then Chavez in Venezuela. We have a very friendly Latin America. Do you imagine Latin America really hating us, really turning to China, an incredibly antagonistic China that had Latin America, not in the Monroe Doctrine sense that we had it, or we have influence down there since the Monroe Doctrine, but really having it, really being able to sort of wield it against us in all kinds of ways. Can you imagine if they go off the dollar? How are we going to impose sanctions without sending the military if the world doesn't rely on the dollar? There's nothing.
Well, he can screw up a lot of things. First of all,
he can screw up so many things, Mark, and he's in the process of screwing them up.
He's also come out, of course, against this ruling that Utah has to redraw congressional lines. They had their lines declared absolutely unconstitutional. They were redistricting there in Utah, and he's complaining about radical left judges. And I wonder if you can just speak to that case in Utah. It's very much relevant to what's happening in Texas and happening in California.
Well, I don't think that there are many radical politicians or judges in Utah. The state is reliably Republican, but they had this good government measure, and I guess under the good government measure, they have to redistrict or district in a certain way, and so it's the law. And that's what conservatives do. That's what red states used to do, was believe in following the law and the will of the voters. So I think they had some kind of initiative or something back there. And so it's a matter of following the voters there. And that's the way they ended up being. I think, by the way, they are all Republicans, which doesn't make much sense, because Salt Lake City ought to be able to put in a Democratic Congress member. And that may be what's happening, Mark. I don't know the state inside out, but it may be that the redistricting will produce, instead of, I think, all Republicans from Utah, it will produce one Democrat if it's not gerrymandered, if it's done in a more logical way. And of course, it raises the whole issue of Trump planning to sue, or claiming he's going to sue California. And I want to do a shout out for Governor Newsom, because he didn't just say, oh, well, I guess we're the good government people, so hit us again, turn the other cheek. Trump, hit us again in California, hit us everywhere, hurt us, and we won't do a thing about it because we believe in some good government commission. We'll have the good government commission after Trumpism. But in the interim, he had only two choices. One was to fight and fire with fire, and the other was to just take it. So I hope everybody votes for the redistricting out here. I don't think that Trump can stop it from going on the ballot. It's otherwise they're gonna control Congress just like that, because they did something awful in Texas, and they couldn't fight them. The Democrats couldn't fight them in Texas, but Democrats and independents and people who care about the government can fight them here. And it's not by keeping the commission; it's by redistricting in a way that counteracts the illegal, improper, but not illegal in the Supreme Court opinions, in the Supreme Court's opinion. But it is certainly unfair. And if you can counteract it, counteract it. Don't just let Trump, hit you and hit you and hit you again, California.
The federal judge ruling yesterday, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was already acknowledged as wrongly deported once, cannot be deported again until at least early October. The U.S. District Court there, Paul Azinis, who is presiding over this case, scheduled an evidentiary hearing for October 6th, said that she intends to have the Trump administration officials testify about the government's efforts to re-deport Abrego. At that same hearing, Abrego's lawyers informed the court that he plans to seek asylum in the United States. Sort of a wild twist. He, of course, was deported by the Trump administration to El Salvador in March. As I say, it was a mistake. And then they offered him this deal where they said, hey, we'll either send you back to El Salvador if you'll plead guilty to these, or we're going to send you to, where was it?
Uganda
or Sudan? Yeah, Uganda. Okay. And, it falls in the category of both lunacy, cruelty, brutality, but the legal part of it, David, I wonder if you could give us a sense of it.
Well, I think he applied for asylum once before and was not granted asylum, and then the case kicked around, and a judge ordered that he could not be deported. But it seems like right now he has a good asylum claim, and it doesn't seem like something where it's what we call res judicata, or where it's decided against you forever. it seems to me like something where you can bring it up again. And so even if he has been denied asylum once before, you can bring it up again based on new facts. And he's got a lot of new facts. Wasn't it in El Salvador where he got thrown into that horrible prison that you're supposed to never be able to walk out of again in life, and had these hard conditions, and they made him kneel down, and all the things that the Trump administration wants to have disseminated throughout the world because he thinks it's going to deter asylum seekers coming to the United States. And that I think put a terrible mark on us for years to come, what Trump is broadcasting to the world. But it seems to me that he has a very good asylum claim right now. I mean, if you or I were the judge, look what they've already done to him once. He can't be sent back to that country. And a person who needs asylum from some country, I think, is entitled to asylum. So I think the courts will back him up. And I think that Abrego Garcia will be able to stay here. Now, they may revive that case against him where he's supposed to be an alien smuggler. He's supposed to be driving some aliens around the United States. And I think his public defender said, bring it on. Try to prove that against him beyond a reasonable doubt. Bring it on. But I think Abrego Garcia, this is Katz-Adamas, I think he's here to stay with a successful asylum.
That is going to really anger.
Asylum claim. With a successful asylum claim.
Yeah. They're going to ride him like a rented mule. Kristi Noem, they're going to have ICE agents out in front of his residence. They're going to look, he's going to be surveilled. Like he is a cause celeb that they really want to get out of this country. But
Mark, he can stay out of trouble. I mean, he can bring them cookies. Officer, I just brought some homemade cookies out for you ICE guys who are watching my house all the time. It'll be like one of those movies, right? Where they come out and say, he's not doing anything. He's not doing anything. He's coming out there.
But they'll claim he's harassing a federal agent or whatever it is. We'll see. But I did want to close with something that you talk about, and it's the line, you can indict a ham sandwich. A grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. Apparently, the D.C. U.S. attorney, I believe is that Jeanine Pirro?
The one and only.
Failing to obtain the indictment against the man who threw that sandwich at the officer. Yeah.
She's lost the unlosable.
Yeah.
She has managed to have a grand jury pick up the phone with that awful voice of hers. Can you imagine her picking up the phone and you saying, I'm very sorry, but the grand jury, the one that's a rubber stamp, the one that always indicts everybody, this was a bridge too far. And her screaming at you in that distinctive voice over a phone. But it is this was the sandwich thrower.
Right. He's a former Justice Department employee, 37 years old. Sean Dunn is his name. And he allegedly threw this submarine-style sandwich at a Customs and Patrol officer stationed at a busy intersection in Northwest D.C. It was August 13th the whole thing happened, but the grand jury that it was impaneled to indict him declined to do so. Yeah.
To paraphrase and have fun with an admonition we got when we joined the U.S. Attorney's Office, if you get pulled over for a traffic violation, don't show your U.S. Attorney badge, and do not throw sandwiches, even if you're having a bad day. And don't talk on the elevator about cases. You don't know who the hell else is on the elevator. 3 rules. One of them, I'm making a mockery of. He was having a really bad day, really stupid. Of course, he shouldn't have thrown the sandwich. They can charge him with a misdemeanor, which is probably what they will. But the U.S. Constitution says before you're charged with a felony in federal court, you have a right to be indicted or have a preliminary hearing. So they always indict you before the date of the preliminary hearing. I don't think they're going to want to have a preliminary hearing on him. I think they'll just charge him with a misdemeanor. He did lose his job. And as I say, that was very, very foolish. And for everybody who's having a bad day and may do something foolish around the country, don't give rope to the Trumpsters. Really, don't do stuff like that. It's
He yelled, F you, you effing fascists. Why are you here? I don't want you in my city. And then he threw the sandwich and he ran.
No. Don't risk your job. Don't give, encouragement to the Trumpsters who want to just use it as an endless loop against people. You gotta meet this moment with valor, but also with discretion.
And she made a big deal. We're going to charge him with the felony. She made a big deal. She made this pronouncement prior to this grand jury impanelment, and she said, I'm talking about Jeanine Pirro, and it's just wild to see that she wasn't able to, squire this across to the finish line.
Can you give me another minute? Because I think your audience would be interested. I'm one of the I had a job, which is a job where you go in front of the grand jury. Very few people. The only people who go in front of a grand jury are a witness called in front of the grand jury, the prosecutor in front of the federal grand jury, the court reporter, and the members of a grand jury. We're a fairly limited number, and one of them is on your show. And one of the interesting things about the grand jury, they get direction from the chief judge, sort of general direction, be fair, have an open mind, that sort of thing. If you have questions, ask your questions. But beyond that, it's just the prosecutor, Mark. It's just the prosecutor who goes in there and presents, you want to try to be fair, but the law doesn't require you to present exculpatory evidence. And so the grand jurors then vote. There has to be a quorum. There's usually about 19. They can vote with a lesser number. But you're the only one who appears along with your agent. That's what was such a joke about the Epstein grand jury. Oh, that's going to get to the bottom of it. It was just one prosecutor, one FBI agent. The FBI agent can give hearsay testimony, and then the grand jury is going to vote after that. So the chance of them voting not to return a true bill, and you give them instructions on the law, but their standard is probable cause. So that they're going to think that there's not even probable cause to charge somebody. I don't think the whole time I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I remember anybody not being charged by a grand jury. Now, one question that comes up in this case very, very quickly is that they can go back to the grand jury and try to charge him again. There's some rules that they have to present the earlier transcripts to the new grand jury. So you should tell them that a grand jury has already turned the case down. But I don't think they're going to go that route, because I think they're going to give up another Katz-Fed. I think they're going to give up on the felony. The guy lost his job. He may try to get it back. I don't think in these circumstances the Civil Service Board would give him his job back. And I think they're going to think a misdemeanor is bad enough. A judge could still actually send him to jail for up to a year on a misdemeanor. I don't think they'll go back to the grand jury. But yes, they can go back to a grand jury, but there's certain rules of fairness they have to follow in front of us.
But why here's Joy is asking the question I was going to ask you. Juries are not going to indict their ridiculous cases. Was it the grand jury that felt, I mean, I know there's no way for you to know, but I'm just wondering if you can suggest what you think the grand jury's thinking, which is, come on, man, we're not going to indict this guy on a felony for throwing a ham sandwich or whatever it was, or,
It was a Washington, D.C. grand jury. They needed to get a substantial majority of the grand jurors. So there might have been some, even a D.C. grand jury that voted to indict him. But they have to get a very substantial majority in order to indict. As I said, it's so rare. I can't even tell you from years ago how many of the 19 they have to get. But they have to get a substantial majority of them.
And as you say, you're only hearing the prosecutor's case. There's no, as you put it, exculpatory, I love that word, exculpatory evidence offered, right? So it makes it even rarer, I would think, because you're not hearing the defense's side.
As I said, I didn't hear of it when I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office for 6 years. In the Central District of California, here in Southern California. But I think that that's probably what happened. I think it may be that they showed the video. And of course, showing the video is kind of overplaying your hand, because once the grand jurors see the video, the guy is like standing back. He throws his sandwich. I mean, okay, you shouldn't do that. And that would probably support a misdemeanor. That is not felony attack on an officer. He didn't aim it at his face or something like that, or he wasn't really close and hurled it as hard as he could. They say the guy had a good throw. They say the guy had a good throw.
Love talking to you, Katz. You're great. Thank you for being here. So generous with your time. Find David on News Nation on the weekends. I think you're still doing that thing where they
Mark,
tee you up.
You're such a great presenter and announcer. I was going to say, please try to watch me on News Nation on Saturday or Sunday around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, our time. And you said it. It's wonderful. Yeah. I didn't have to do a plug, but I did one anyway.
You should never have to do your own plugs. You should always just let me know and I'll do them. But great stuff. I love it when they tee you up against the conservative or whatever they call themselves now, the GOP or MAGA or whatever they are.
I usually get the Heritage Foundation, which kind of at any moment these guys could get a judgeship. So or they have somebody from the Republican National Committee, something like that. But they really do. They try to present both sides of it, and the presenters are unstintingly fair to me. So it's no reason not to go on that station. I can't really say that about when I was on with Laura Ingraham. She was snarky the times I was on with her.
Well, it's truly agenda driven, that crew. So, all right, David Katz, thank you. And we'll see you next week. Debbie Katz, everybody. John David. See you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thank you, everyone. Wow, what a show. It has been an extraordinary crew through here. We've had a lot of stuff going on. I want to quickly recognize the fine work of my colleagues, which is something that I do today. And frankly, I seldom have an opportunity to do that. Let me finish.
Can you let him finish, sir?
Because they seldom do work that requires any sort of recognition. But what? Today, Albert, very impressive.
Did you really just do that?
And Kim, having stitched together a lot. Now,
Kim,
Kim,
did you get a Sarah Kendzior for us today? I'm not sure.
It was Kim. Kim is the Sarah Whisperer.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good, Kim. Now, I see a lot in the chat. People want Sarah on all the time, but Sarah's a kind of a big deal. It's like,
no, you can't think like that. So is David K. Johnston, and look at that. We have him on every week. So
that's
why
true.
why shouldn't we get Sarah every week?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
For years too. Like that's a true OG. If we want to talk about OG guests, we've had David K. Johnston on weekly
for years. Yeah, every week for years now. So
even through COVID, we had him. So that's a long time now.
Albert is correct about that, and thank you for reminding me. So, all right, well,
Albert, thank you.
I was going to say we'll go for her again in a couple of weeks, and then we'll slowly, turn up the heat of the water.
Yeah, before she knows it, she'll be a regular part of the show, and she'll be like, "How does this happen?" Who even are these
to
people?
me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
I slowly do it.
Who's Mark Thompson?
All right. Lucy McAllister. Hello, everyone. Love our Lucy McAllister. Thank you for the $10 super chat. And hello back to you, Lucy. Tom Graves, who wants to explain Trump's joke 70 million times?
I don't think we do.
Yeah. Exculpatory is a ding word, says Nullifidian. He's absolutely right. There are actually a couple of ding words in David Katz's run. Mark, you are a super trooper. When you feel sick, you are still doing the show. Amazing. ABBA. What is the ABBA reference from Dan KO6YG? Do you know, Kim?
Yeah, Super Trooper. It's a song, an ABBA song.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that in Mamma Mia, I think?
Yeah.
Or
gosh, that's really great. That is sick ABBA knowledge. That's
Well,
really, really impressive.
You just hit right in my sweet spot there. So,
Really, what a day you're having, Kim. What a day you're having.
Yeah.
I already ordered my flu mist vaccine thanks to the doctor's last interview on this show, says Heather Kennedy. Yeah, this development with the flu mist that you can spray it in. It's like the flu shot.
Nasal,
Yeah, you just go through the nose. Pretty cool. I was going to get my RSV and pneumonia vaccine today, but now I'm sick, so I can't go and do it. So I have to maybe do it next week. We're having a rough summer in this house, I'll tell you that. Got some bad news about my sweet cat, only 10 years old. We love this cat. Super, most people who watch the show know we just lost our darling Frenchie. We were so in love with her. We went for a big operation to try to save her life, and she just didn't survive. And it's so profoundly sad. And the house is just filled with sadness already. And we lost another cat at the beginning of the summer. And then we have our Charlie, and he is wonderful, but he's kind of circling the drain. It's all bad. But we have the 10-year-old who is still active and sweet and so wonderful. But we just took her to the vet, and she has worse labs than the Frenchie labs. And Frenchie, I say, she has a serious kidney ailment. And it has been brutal here. We are so filled with sadness. I have no words to describe. I'm just sharing this with you. I'm not looking for sympathy of any kind, but I mean, I know everybody's got their issues and problems.
Yeah.
It's just, but when you stack it on top, then I got sick. This isn't horribly sick, but I couldn't do this thing. So now next week, we have to take our little Cash is her name, because she's black and Courtney felt we should name her Cash, like Johnny Cash wore black, I guess, and it was the thinking. Anyway, she's the cute little thing, and we've got to take her next week. So all of the other things that were going to happen medically and logistically, they have to be bumped so we can take Cash in for ultrasound of her kidneys and also to check her heart. So it's brutal. It's really brutal because she is young enough that we thought we'd get many years with her, and now we're really concerned.
It seems
the doctor was alarmed at how bad her kidney situation is. So
it seems like one animal getting sick after another.
Yeah, and we just didn't expect it with this vintage. I mean, they were all older cats, the cats that are kind of moving into the crisis territory, but we didn't expect we'd have a crisis with her. And of course, last thing on this, they have these, oftentimes you give subcutaneous fluids to a cat, and those fluids help with cats that are struggling with kidney disease, because kidney disease is very common among cats. And so anyway, you need the cat to kind of hold still to get this needle in and get the water, the saline or whatever flowing. And of course, the most hyperkinetic of all of the cats is Cash. Cash, you cannot hold her still. She doesn't want to be held still. She's screaming. It turns into a whole drama. We tried it yesterday. We got to try to do it today. So it's definitely changing the arithmetic around here. So, but all of you who are struggling with cats and creatures who you love so much, or dogs, cats, fish, birds, to me, they're all the same. And it's tough. So shout out to you guys. Anything else I have to do, Kim? I know
I think I have 3 stories I want to make sure we mention today.
Please. Smash the like button for the dedication of Kim McAllister to do 3 more
with your
stories.
Iron rod.
Yeah.
Did we play our Gavin Newsom audio that we had
No,
from
you're right.
earlier? Because it's really good, and I just feel like we need to see it.
You're absolutely right.
Gavin
and
Newsom
wait a minute,
was
before we play it, Albert, why didn't we play it? I blame you, Albert. I mean, is there a...
I blame you.
Oh, maybe it's my fault.
Yeah.
Well,
we were scooting along.
All right. Go ahead. This is Gavin Newsom talking about the state of democracy, right?
Yep.
I don't think Donald Trump wants another election. I have 24 Trump 2028 hats. His folks keep sending me.
And you think he's going to run again?
No, don't give me. Who spends $200 million on a ballroom at their home and then leaves the house?
So
this is serious, guys. This is serious.
So it'll be Newsom Trump in 28.
No. This guy doesn't believe in free, fair elections. He tried to wreck this country. Were you there, January 6th? I mean, he tried to light democracy on fire. He dialed for almost 12,000 votes. Now he's doing it in plain sight. And people said, oh, just Trump being Trump. You will lose your country. Again, it's not about Democrats. It's about all of us.
So you're absolutely convinced he's...
I'm absolutely convinced.
2028.
You've seen it. He tried to steal the last election. He's trying to rig it in plain sight. I'm on the other side of giving a damn about people's feelings about this moment. I will express myself more clearly and more concisely because I see the threats in very vivid terms in ways I never saw before. And I see the consequences of not just those threats from the administration, but the actions of this administration, more perhaps than any other governor in the United States, because I've seen the damage firsthand to communities, this economy, our reputation, to our allies, the world we're trying to build. This is simply the most destructive and damaging individual in my lifetime that happens to be the president of the United States. I have to meet this moment. And so, this has been very clarifying. It's been very sobering.
Yep.
Wow. That really states it so well.
Another story I wanted to make sure we hit is the absolutely outrageous, wild thing that we as a country are doing. We are paying to provide a funeral, an Air Force funeral with military honors, the whole 9 yards, for Ashley Babbitt. You remember who she is?
She was shot and killed at the January 6th riot because as she tried to enter the Capitol.
Yeah.
Break into the Capitol. Yeah.
The request was initially denied by the Biden administration. And now the Trump administration says, yeah, we're going to give her an Air Force funeral, military honors, everything else.
That is
mind blown,
repulsive to me. Repulsive. But this is what's happening across the board. They're recharacterizing and reconstituting basic history. Look at the way they are dusting off Confederate generals and Confederate war heroes, putting their names back on naval bases, military bases. It's, again, it's an abomination, an absolute abomination.
I had another one, but I
what
forget
other
what
stuff
it
do
is.
you have to share with me on the way out that'll make me angry and depressed?
Just piss you off on the way out the door?
Yeah.
Oh, I know. How about this guy? Did you hear about this local GOP elections chair? He is accused of drugging his granddaughter's ice cream. And I'm not even kidding. It was one of these situations, it appears, where you plant something and then you accuse a restaurant of doing the thing that you did yourself. I don't know, for money or what.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, you find a finger in your ice cream, but you put it there yourself kind of situation. Right. In this case, this guy's name is James Yokeley. He's a Republican who sits on the Surrey County Board of Elections in North Carolina. And he flagged down a police officer at a convenience store to tell them that his 2 granddaughters found pills in their Dairy Queen Blizzards. But according to police, and that girls did not ingest the substances, according to police, the pills were legal narcotics. They were taken to a state lab, but video shows Yokeley placing the pills in his granddaughter's frozen treats. These now 66-year-old guy charged with a couple felony counts, contaminating food and drink with a controlled substance, felony child abuse, felony possession of narcotics. So busted.
Wow.
Yeah.
He lied about the whole thing.
Lied about the whole thing.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
Can you imagine?
Man.
Anyway, there you go.
Wow.
Little uplifting story on the way out.
That is unreal. That's a good story.
You are a cover-up artist, and you are a liar.
Yeah.
I'm bad. I'm sorry.
My bad. I'm sorry. I love it. Very, very good.
Yeah.
I do want to recognize Luis. Mark, stop being so humble. The $5 super chat. He says, "You're the Otani of YouTube."
Yeah, that's right.
The huge soda genius from the future. Guests should be lining up for the MT show experience. Yeah, wow, Luis. When you put it like that, I feel much better about myself. Thank you.
With the secret gambling allegations that surround Otani, is that what Mark is?
I don't think he was referencing that. But tomorrow on this enviable show, those lucky people who'll be joining are Michael Shore and Jim Avila. We'll look at the week in politics. We'll review that crazy cabinet session, but we'll also look at everything that Trump has planned. Trump continues to walk back farther and farther away from the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We'll get Michael Snyder, the culture blaster, on what you can do this Labor Day weekend, movies and streaming. And we'll do Florida, of course. If you missed it, any of it, the conversation with Sarah Kendzior will be posted as a separate video. Please share it, enjoy it, and offer it to others to take in as well. It helps grow the show, and it also helps get a really great person's opinion out to the public. So now,
I'm Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Head over to Kim's After Party Live. And
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Out of time. Bye-bye. Thank you, Albert. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.